The Galactic Empire's ultimatum echoed across the Terran system: surrender, or face complete destruction. The message was clear, dripping with arrogance, and the Empire expected fear and immediate compliance. They were, after all, a force of unimaginable size and strength, their technology refined through centuries of conquest. Whole civilizations had fallen silent under the weight of their demands. But humanity's leaders didn't respond with terror. In command centers across Earth and on ships orbiting above, they laughed, a collective, unrestrained reaction. The reply from Admiral Chase, humanity's finest strategist and seasoned captain, was succinct. "We're not much for bowing. But if you want to fight, we're here for it." His words traveled back to the Imperial fleet, meeting with silence and barely contained fury. The Empire's lead ships began to close in, their dark hulls blotting out stars, sleek as midnight and designed to strike terror. They moved in perfect formation, precise, clinical, machines of war operated by minds steeped in strict protocol and unwavering obedience. But humanity wasn't standing still. Chase's fleet was small by comparison, less imposing, less polished. Each ship had earned its scars, carrying stories from past battles against the unknown hazards of deep space and asteroid belts. In contrast to the Empire's ships, these vessels were practical, adapted from repurposed cargo haulers and freight liners, upgraded over decades. To Imperial eyes, they seemed almost laughable, nothing that should pose a threat. But Admiral Chase's fleet had secrets. They didn't need to impress, they only needed to surprise. His voice crackled over the fleet's comms. "All right, people, show them how Earth fights. No grand formations, no strict lines. Hit them where they're weak, keep them guessing." Within moments, Chase's fleet broke apart, small groups scattering like sand into the nearby asteroid field. There was no order in the Empire's eyes, no pattern to predict, nothing to exploit. Only a confusion of scattered ships and fragments that darted between asteroids, weaving in and out with practiced ease. The Empire's ships began to close in, confident they could overpower these isolated groups, yet each move forward was met with chaos. Human ships emerged from asteroid shadows at impossible angles, firing a concentrated barrage at critical weak points on the Empire's cruisers. Instead of grand weaponry, humanity's arsenal was focused on precision. Energy pulses and heavy lasers hit with pinpoint accuracy, specifically aimed at engines and shield generators. In one deft move, an older, seemingly unremarkable human frigate sliced the shields off an Imperial vessel, leaving it vulnerable for just a moment, long enough for a swarm of smaller ships to sweep in and disable its engines. Imperial ships were left helpless, drifting, taken out of the fight without a single fatal blow. The Empire struggled to regain control, their once unshakable formation devolving as human ships appeared and disappeared at random, slipping between rocks and shields like wraiths. Imperial commanders exchanged frantic messages, struggling to track the movement of their opponents. Even the sensors, designed to see through jamming, were overwhelmed by an unending stream of false readings. Holographic decoys flickered across their screens, and every sensor lock was suddenly a question, a hesitation, a doubt. It was the ultimate psychological warfare, and it took its toll. One by one, the Imperial ships faltered, split and outflanked, every effort to regroup disrupted by another ambush. Meanwhile, Imperial officers watched with growing unease as taunting messages filled their comm channels. Some were intercepted transmissions from humanity's fleet, others were holographic broadcasts from Earth itself. They showed images of human laughter, the faces of Chase's crew smirking back at them from their own screens, faces full of easy confidence and mockery. The Empire had thought this was to be a display of dominance, a warning to Earth. Instead, they found themselves mocked, every step turned against them. Orders from the Imperial flagship grew frantic, the calm, calculated facades slipping as the Imperial Admiral barked for a final advance. They drove forward, desperate to restore control, but the humans stayed just out of reach, each encounter marked by quick, lethal strikes before they slipped back into the asteroid field. Empire tactics, rigid and controlled, found no target in this chaos. The human fleet's scattered formations gave way to improvisation, each ship acting with the intuition of its seasoned crew, weaving in and out with the skill of deep space pioneers, people who knew what it was to make it on their own in a galaxy that gave them no guarantees. Finally, the Imperial Admiral, his face a mask of frustration and disbelief, opened a direct channel to the human fleet. Chase's image appeared, calm and steady against the backdrop of his bridge. The Imperial Admiral's voice was harsh, almost incredulous. "What is this madness? You think your little games will save you? Why do you resist us? Why not submit, like every other species before you?" Admiral Chase grinned, his gaze steady and unflinching. "Because we're not like any other species you've met. We don't fight for conquest. We fight for our freedom, and if you're here to take it, you're in for one hell of a challenge." The Empire's admiral scowled, but Chase's words had reached beyond him. Across the Empire's ships, officers and soldiers alike felt a chill at the humans' fearless defiance. They had faced countless worlds, species, and civilizations, each different yet all, ultimately, conquerable. But this human fleet was something new, something unpredictable. They didn't follow the script, didn't fear the Empire's superior firepower, and had no problem turning the battle into a spectacle of calculated chaos. As the Imperial Admiral cut the channel, Chase's crew felt the tension lift slightly. Messages flew between them, sharing the grim humor of the moment. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and yet here they were, laughing in the face of an empire that was supposed to be unstoppable. The Empire's flagship hovered ominously, a massive, darkened silhouette against the stars, as its remaining fleet moved to encircle the asteroid field. They were intent on containing humanity's chaotic tactics, hoping to press in on all sides and crush the Terran resistance. But as they repositioned, their screens lit up with new targets blinking into existence. Human reinforcements, hidden by the asteroid clusters, had arrived silently, merging with Chase's fleet and creating a fresh layer of uncertainty for the Empire's forces. The Imperial officers tried to adjust their strategy, but the scene was devolving into mayhem. Each time an Imperial cruiser moved to engage a group of human ships, another set emerged from behind an asteroid or drifted into a gap in the Empire's formation, unleashing a brutal barrage before slipping away again. In the bridge of the Imperial flagship, frustration was mounting, and commands grew sharper, more frantic. In the midst of the chaos, Chase's voice came through the calm channels again, not to his own fleet but patched directly to the Imperial flagship in a brazen taunt. His tone was calm, almost casual, underscored with confidence. "You seem to be having some navigation issues. I can understand, it's hard to keep up out here in the real galaxy, isn't it?" He chuckled softly, his voice drifting through the speakers like a predator playing with its prey. Imperial commanders bristled, unused to this level of direct defiance. They'd expected a crumbling force, not one that could laugh while fighting an armada 10 times its size. Chase's words rattled through the ranks, unsettling the rigid soldiers of the Empire. Their disciplined minds struggled with the unorthodox tactics, caught between protocol and a creeping sense of doubt. Suddenly, the human ships executed a coordinated strike. In a matter of seconds, small, agile vessels emerged from the dark, armed with specialized pulse cannons that temporarily disabled shield generators. Within the Empire's lines, cruisers went dark one after another, shields collapsing as human ships slipped in to deliver precise, disabling shots to engines and weapons systems. The Empire's vessels were forced to power down, drift helplessly, while humanity's fleet moved methodically through their ranks, taking out one ship at a time. Panic began to spread among the Imperial officers. They had never seen their own forces fall with such ease. Even in the face of overwhelming odds, the humans showed no sign of retreat. Instead, they pressed forward, every maneuver a new challenge, every attack perfectly timed. What should have been an easy victory was turning into a rout. Imperial soldiers watched as their screens filled with red alerts, reports of disabled cruisers, system failures, and, worst of all, human laughter crackling through the speakers. As the battle wore on, the Imperial flagship finally managed to catch one of the human ships in its sights, a cruiser that had taken a daring risk by moving out of cover. Imperial gunners readied their weapons, calibrating for a clear shot, but just as they locked on, the cruiser vanished from their screens. Seconds later, it reappeared in another section of the battlefield, having used a short-range warp jump that confused the Empire's tracking systems. Other human ships followed suit, popping in and out of sight with an almost taunting ease. The Empire's targeting systems, designed for enemies that moved predictably, were overwhelmed. Human ships swarmed the Imperial flagship, moving fast enough to stay out of its primary range, landing blows on its shields in carefully timed, coordinated strikes. The flagship's shield generators flared, struggling to keep up with the onslaught, and then, suddenly, failed. For a split second, the Imperial bridge went quiet as officers stared at the black, empty screens where their shield status had once been. Chase's voice echoed over the speakers. "Looks like your shields are down. We could finish you off right here, but where's the fun in that?" His words held a challenge, a hint of mockery that cut through the Imperial ranks like a knife. For the first time, the Empire's officers realized that these humans weren't just fighting to win. They were toying with them, exposing the Empire's weaknesses for all to see. One of the Empire's junior officers, his face pale with fear, turned to his superior. "Sir, what do we do? They're everywhere. We can't get a lock on them." The senior officer clenched his jaw, unable to look away from the chaos unfolding on the screens. "Stay in formation. Hold the line," he commanded, his voice strained. But he, too, was beginning to understand the reality before him. Humanity wasn't the helpless, backwater species they'd assumed. They had adapted, innovated, and were now facing the Empire on their terms, with tactics and technology that the Empire had neither foreseen nor prepared for. Human ships continued their relentless assault, slipping between the Empire's formations, turning the battle into a test of survival for the Imperials. Every trick the Empire tried was countered, every move anticipated. The human fleet seemed to predict their every action, and it became clear that humanity's forces had anticipated this confrontation, had trained for it, and were now reveling in the thrill of defiance. As another Imperial cruiser drifted lifelessly into the asteroid field, Chase's voice returned, calm and almost friendly, as if they weren't in the middle of a galactic standoff. "I'd suggest taking notes, but I don't think you'll get a second chance to use them. This battle's over before it even started. And we're just getting warmed up." Back on the Imperial bridge, the flagship's commander sat in stunned silence, forced to confront the truth he'd dismissed for so long. The humans were more than a nuisance, they were a real threat, and one he had underestimated at every turn. Chase's laughter was still echoing through the speakers as the Empire's armada reeled, battered and humiliated by the species they had so arrogantly thought they could crush. Humanity, a collection of beings who had once been seen as insignificant, now had the Empire cornered, proving in every action that they would not bow, they would not break. As the Imperial flagship's power began to wane, officers across the Empire's fleet exchanged uneasy glances. The battle had taken a turn no one could have foreseen, and for the first time in centuries, the Empire felt the sting of humility. As the remnants of the Empire's fleet struggled to regroup, the human ships continued to press their advantage. Despite the devastation they had inflicted, their tactics shifted subtly. Where before they'd focused on disabling and disrupting, now they started isolating Imperial ships, systematically cutting them off from any chance of retreat or regrouping. For the first time, the Empire's officers saw that the humans had planned for every contingency, and they were no longer holding back. An Imperial admiral, flanked by his lieutenants, paced on the bridge of one of the larger destroyers, his gaze locked on the tactical display, which showed their own forces being dismantled. The battlefield around them was in shambles, filled with the debris of fallen cruisers, and every move he attempted to coordinate was quickly countered by the human fleet. Messages from his sub-commanders painted a picture of utter chaos and fear. Reports of ships with engines disabled, systems down, and terrified crews flooded in from all sides. He realized, with mounting dread, that the humans were not just resilient, they were relentless. Then came the most unsettling move yet. One by one, the lights on the remaining Imperial ships dimmed, and the fleet began to lose contact with each other. The human ships had managed to disrupt their communications entirely, severing the Imperials from one another in the dark of space. Now, each vessel was isolated, left to fight alone, and as the minutes ticked by, it became clear to everyone on board that there would be no rescue, no reinforcements to help them rally. They were trapped, and the humans were closing in. A lone voice from the human fleet broke through the static, broadcasting to the remaining Imperial ships. It was Chase. His tone had shifted from taunting to something almost conversational, like a teacher explaining a lesson to an inattentive class. "This is the part where you surrender," he said calmly. "You've lost communications, your formations are broken, and there's no way out. Let's save ourselves some time, shall we?" But the Empire's officers, bred for pride and power, could not bring themselves to concede. They had come expecting a show of force, not a battle for survival, and even in the face of overwhelming odds, they clung to the idea of Imperial supremacy. One officer, his voice barely masking his rage, replied defiantly, "We will never surrender to a species like yours. The Empire does not yield." Chase's response came quickly, underscored with something colder than humor. "Then you're about to learn why we're different from anyone you've faced." The last words hung in the air, a declaration that humanity was not here to bargain or seek mercy. This was a fight they had chosen, and one they intended to finish. A wave of human ships surged forward, executing coordinated attacks on the isolated Imperial vessels. The precision was surgical. Every strike was designed to disable critical systems, not obliterate, as though humanity was intent on making sure the Empire would remember every moment of its downfall. Each Imperial vessel, once a symbol of unchallenged power, found itself reduced to a floating wreck in the silence of space, its crew forced to watch as their empires might crumbled around them. In one section of the battlefield, a smaller Imperial cruiser managed to get its engines online, attempting to flee. But before it could even clear the debris field, a human ship, sleek and menacing, appeared directly in its path. With nowhere to run, the cruiser's captain tried to appeal, his voice wavering. "We have injured aboard. Let us pass, and we won't interfere further." Chase's voice came over their comms, softer this time, almost solemn. "There's no going back for you. But we'll let you live. Send a message to your Empire. Tell them what you saw, what you faced. And let them know, this is only the beginning." The cruiser, now marked with a clear message of humanity's warning, was allowed to limp away, a ghost of its former self. Back at the core of the battle, the Imperial flagship was the last to remain in any semblance of fighting order. Surrounding it were the scattered remnants of its fleet, powerless and drifting. Chase's ship moved forward, facing the flagship directly, and for a long moment, there was silence. The human crew, hardened veterans all, stood at attention as Chase initiated a final, open comlink to the Imperial flagship's commander. "What will it be?" Chase asked, giving the Empire one last chance to yield. The commander, though clearly shaken, still clung to the scraps of his dignity. You are resilient, I'll give you that. But this changes nothing. The Empire will recover, and you will fall." Chase gave a faint smile, a look of steely resolve in his eyes. "You're welcome to try. But next time, we won't be this gentle." He motioned to his crew, and the human fleet began to pull back, leaving the battered flagship alone amid the wreckage of its once mighty armada. As the humans departed, they left behind a silent message, a constellation of disabled Imperial ships floating in a stark reminder of the consequences of underestimating humanity. The battle was over, but the Empire would remember this day, when their arrogance met a force that refused to bow, that laughed in the face of their power, and turned the tides against them. For the Empire, this was a moment that would echo through their ranks and beyond. And for humanity, it was a declaration of their place in the galaxy, a statement made not with words, but with the silence of fallen ships and the quiet victory that followed. As the humans departed the battlefield, the Empire's flagship drifted in eerie silence, surrounded by the wreckage of what had once been an invincible fleet. Every officer aboard sat in stunned disbelief, the reality of their defeat settling in like a cold weight. The Emperor himself had placed his faith in this armada, confident they would crush the upstart humans, and teach the galaxy to fear the Empire's might once more. Instead, they were left adrift, broken and humiliated by a species they had dismissed as little more than an oddity. Across the remnants of the Imperial fleet, scattered survivors sent garbled messages back to the Imperial command, unable to mask the horror and shame that laced their reports. They described human ships that seemed to appear out of nowhere, tactics that defied all conventional logic, and the unnerving calm with which humans had faced down the largest fleet in the known galaxy. They recounted the laughter that had echoed through their comms, a sound that now rang in their ears like a nightmare, a reminder of the humans' defiance, their utter lack of fear in the face of what was supposed to be an inevitable defeat. News of the defeat traveled quickly, reaching the heart of the Empire within hours. Imperial leaders, once stoic and unwavering, found themselves confronted with reports that were impossible to ignore. An emergency council convened in the Imperial Palace, where high-ranking officials, advisors, and military leaders gathered to hear first-hand accounts from the battered survivors. They listened in silence as the flagship's captain, humbled and visibly shaken, recounted the final moments of the battle. "The humans, they fought as if they had nothing to lose," he said, his voice trembling. "We threw everything at them. Every strategy, every weapon. And yet they countered us at every turn. They didn't just defeat us, they humiliated us. They showed us we were predictable, rigid. It was like they'd read every move before we made it. And worst of all, they laughed at us. They knew something we didn't." A ripple of unease spread through the council chamber. The Empire, long accustomed to victory, had never encountered an enemy that fought with such disregard for their own survival, with such boldness and ingenuity. Their tactics, once the cornerstone of imperial dominance, had been stripped bare, exposed as ineffective against a force that thrived on adaptability and sheer audacity. In a rare show of vulnerability, the Emperor himself spoke, addressing the room with an expression as cold as it was resolved. "This is not a defeat we will allow to define us. The humans have exploited weaknesses we overlooked, weaknesses we must now eradicate. If they think they can challenge us, they are gravely mistaken. We will not let this stand." But despite the Emperor's words, a shadow of doubt lingered over the room. The Empire had encountered countless civilizations, crushed resistance after resistance, yet none had challenged them as the humans had. None had dared to laugh in the face of their power, to dismantle their fleets with a mix of raw ingenuity and sheer nerve. And even as the council disbanded, the officials left with the unsettling realization that humanity was unlike any foe they'd faced. Meanwhile, back on Earth, Chase and his crew received a hero's welcome. News of the victory spread like wildfire, uniting humanity in a rare moment of shared pride and triumph. Chase, normally reserved and unassuming, became a figure of legend, a symbol of what humanity could achieve when pushed to its limits. His words, his calm assurance in the face of the Empire, became a rallying cry across the stars. "We fight for freedom, not for conquest," he had said, a sentiment that resonated deeply among the people of Earth and beyond. For humanity, the battle marked a new chapter, a turning point that solidified their place in the galaxy. They had proven that they could stand up to the largest, most powerful empire in existence, that their creativity, resilience, and fierce independence could match even the mightiest forces. They had shown the galaxy that they were not to be underestimated, and that any attempt to subjugate them would be met with unyielding defiance. In the days that followed, other civilizations reached out, eager to form alliances with the humans. Once thought of as a minor species from a remote planet, humanity was now seen as a force of innovation and strength, a beacon of hope for those who had lived under the shadow of the Empire's rule. Together, these allied species shared a renewed sense of possibility, a belief that the Empire could, indeed, be challenged. For the first time in millennia, the Galactic Empire found itself on uncertain ground. Its image of invincibility was tarnished, its officers haunted by the memory of human laughter echoing across the battlefield. Whispers began to spread throughout the Empire, rumors that the humans had only shown a fraction of their capabilities, that they were capable of feats even more incredible than the battle had revealed. The Empire's citizens, long conditioned to believe in the Empire's unbreakable power, began to question, if humans could defy the Empire so boldly, what else might be possible? And as the Emperor looked out over his empire, he felt the weight of that question pressing upon him. He knew, deep down, that the humans would not be easily subdued. They had shown a resilience, a defiance that could not be quelled by force alone. For the first time, he faced the unsettling possibility that the Empire's long-standing dominance was not as secure as he had once believed. In the quiet of his chamber, the Emperor contemplated his next move, aware that his every decision would shape the future of the Empire and its place in the galaxy. The humans had issued a challenge not just with their ships or their tactics, but with their very existence, a defiant assertion that freedom and resilience could overcome even the most powerful of foes. And somewhere in the vastness of space, humanity stood ready, prepared to face whatever the Empire would throw at them next. They had faced the impossible, defied the odds, and they were only just beginning.